What's up, fuckers? Welcome back. Fear Street Part motherfucking 2, 1978.
Justin's voice gets really high when he gets really excited. Hope y'all caught that. It's amazing.
I'm so hyped for
It
this.
gets me pumped.
Yeah, well, you know, Fear Street, I gotta say, now, probably one of my favorite trilogies.
That's a bold claim. We got a lot of good trilogies. And we have stuff that extend past trilogies. But I do break certain franchises up as like a trilogy, the first three.
Yeah. My favorite.
You said one of your favorites.
One of my favorites. Yeah. So, it's great, man. And I'm glad we're finally getting to talk about this. I'm glad we watched. We pretty much watched these back to back to back.
Yeah, I watched part 1 twice, and then I watched part 2 and 3 back to back.
Yeah.
So I'm glad I did, because after I saw part 2 is my favorite of all 3. So after I saw that, I was like, I have to see what happens. Like I'm an hour and 50 minutes away from knowing how this concludes. I have to, no matter what time it was at night. I was like, I have to do it, and I'm glad I did.
I think what helped us too is we kind of started late, so we didn't watch Fear Street the way when it came out. So we watched 2, I think, on Thursday, which was like the day before Fear Street Part 3 came out. Mm-hmm. So it was like perfect timing.
Yep, we waited like a week to watch part 1, and then 2 had just come out. So we were like, all right, well, let's watch part 1. And we talked about part 1, and then by the time we watched part 2, part 3 was coming out the next day, like Justin said. So
these are dope, and I'm excited to talk about this. But before we do, let's shout out our sponsors. First sponsor I want to shout out is Kosi Jew, boring_Millie. Get your logos done. If you need a shirt, you need a banner, you need some kind of neon sign in the background, hit my boy up.
If you need some dope design, hit him up.
Yeah, man. You know, he gives good rates. If you tell him that Justin and Romo sent you, he'll hook you up with a discount. That's for damn sure. Second,
we got Brandon Jack, and Just Be Kicking It. Go buy some of his clothes. The stuff is absolutely incredible. It's the comfiest shit I own. And then also, they got a podcast now. Yep. So go see the Just Be Kicking It podcast. Go listen to it. Got some great episodes if you're into sneakers, if you're into hoops, if you're into music. All that stuff gets intertwined through sneaker culture.
Yeah, we're going to have them on for the show too as well. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off early. But we're going to have Brandon on for Candyman whenever that comes out. We're going to have Vise on for Willy's Wonderland, which will probably... I'm excited about too. So, fun fact, I got to work with one of the producers on a commercial, or a PSA. I got to work on a PSA with one of the producers of Willy's Wonderland.
Mm-hmm. Which Justin still needs to watch.
Yes, I do need to watch it.
He's been talking about it. He needs to watch it.
I've been
telling him he needs to watch it.
I heard Nick Cage doesn't talk once in that movie.
Don't ruin it for people.
Okay.
That's one thing I didn't want you to know before going into that movie.
Okay.
I wanted you to watch the movie and then get 75% of the way through and be like, this guy really ain't going to say anything all movie, which is how I felt. And it was amazing. It was the best feeling. I was like, he's really not going to talk.
Because you know that motherfucker yells all the time. You know, he gets those big eyes.
He's fantastic in Mandy. He's incredible in Mandy. That's another good horror film. So
he's also great in fucking National Treasure.
He's good enough. I love that he's kind of more went to like wanting to do like B-movie horror. It's been amazing. And I love Nicolas Cage in those roles. It's amazing.
Last sponsor, Han Junkies, Megan, Volante, TT. Golden Ghost Awards coming up. You know we're presenting. We're going to be doing a makeover. Actually, not soon anymore because everything... personal details we won't get into, but that is still happening. We got some dope shit coming up with them. Mm-hmm. But with that said, go on their websites, listen to their reviews, and check out the haunts.
Go see the haunts that they talk about. Like, they're not just blowing smoke. Like, we've been to the haunts that they said were scariest, and they are scariest. Yeah. Like, to some that I didn't want to go to. So...
and one of the things that I want to do too is, not necessarily give reviews, but I'd love to do some haunt episodes. Mm-hmm. I don't want to like review them. I just want to.
That's their niche.
Yeah, but niche. I do want to do some of that stuff. Also, I haven't been recording the audio, but now it's recording.
We'll have to snip the audio and put them together.
Yep.
Or what?
Okay. Anyway, let's get into this episode 2. Actually, let's chug this beer first.
Yes, gotta chug a beer. And Dos Equis, unpaid sponsor. Shout out Heineken. We just go buy it and we drink it. So
cheers, bro. Should I do the...
Yeah, I mean, you could do the full one or just cling the empty one.
Oh, fuck you.
Just singling the empty Heineken.
Hey, one to talk, right?
I actually drink. I do drink mine. That was an empty can.
It's not empty. It's got stuff in here. All right. Anyway, cheers, bro. Fuck.
Bottles are very hard to chug.
Woo.
Really good though. The Second Amber is fantastic. Very good. So, Fear Street Part 2, 1978. We go full slasher. We go almost like we're at Camp Crystal Lake, is what it felt like.
Yeah.
We have a killer that resembles Jason in Part 2 with the burlesque mask or the sack over his head. Running around with an axe, which I think is super cool. I don't think there's as many axe killers that are mainstream that I would like to see. And I thought that is an awesome weapon choice because that's terrifying, someone chasing you with an axe. Mm-hmm. But we find out off rip who C. Berman is because, well, I guess you can't say off rip because you get introduced to Ziggy and Cindy, who are sisters at the camp. Ziggy's very in your face up front. Cindy's more hold stuff to the chest and everything. And they're sisters, they're polar opposites, but over the course of the movie, you really feel their connection, which I think makes this movie so strong is all the actors' performances and how they connect with one another. So I thought at first Cindy was going to be C. Berman because Cindy, C. Berman.
Yeah.
And we find out later Ziggy is C. Berman.
Stands for Christine.
Yeah, which is dope. Because I love Sadie Sink, and I think she does a great job being C. Berman, and it makes like almost just knowing like a character's backstory. Like it felt better seeing C. Berman in Part 3 and later and at the beginning of Part 2. It feels better knowing that like she's linked up with Sadie Sink playing her character as her younger self at Camp Nightwing back in 1978. So you have all that going on, and at the beginning, I skipped over it, but at the beginning you have Dina bring Sam, who's now possessed by the witch, it looks like, to C. Berman's house, and C. Berman's like, get away, don't do that. She also has alarm clocks all over the place, which is fucking weird, but you have all that going on.
Yeah. It goes up at the same time every day too, right?
Yeah.
I can't remember what the time is, but
it was 10 something. So anyway, all that's going on. So that really brings us to the flashback to talk about 1978 and Camp Nightwing. So Justin, like, how did you feel about the Camp Nightwing? How'd you feel about the Camp Nightwing setting? Like it being more of a slasher feel compared to Part 1. Like set at almost like it really feels like Camp Crystal Lake.
That's the immediate vibe I got.
Mm-hmm.
Camp Crystal Lake, Jason Voorhees, especially with the sack going over Tommy's head. Which actually, you didn't even, because you knew who he was at the beginning. You didn't see the sack until later on in the movie.
Yeah, which is cool, because you get, so to skip forward a little bit, mm-hmm. Tommy ends up being the Camp Nightwing Killer, which there's a lot of like thoughts that you have going into this movie of like who's going to be the Camp Nightwing Killer. Is it going to be someone out of the complete blue? Is it someone we've seen before? And then it turns out we are introduced to Tommy, who is Cindy's boyfriend, and we also are introduced to Alice, who is kind of your typical 70s character with short hair, rocker. We see her just eventually become very good friends with Cindy, which is really cool. I liked her character arc the most out of everybody in this. Yeah, I liked her character arc the most because she's really rough around the edges at the beginning, and she starts to open up throughout the film, and then obviously all towards the end where she dies, and it dies at Tommy's hand too. It's just like
I like Cindy's character arc the most.
Cindy's character arc is great because she is so reserved.
She started to, and then like she started as like this really nice Sunnyvale like character. She's not from Sunnyvale, but she pretended
she feels like that.
Yeah, she was acting like she was from Sunnyvale, and she goes from flowers and peaches to skulls and saying fucking shit every other word.
When they get really into the cult stuff and she gets so intrigued by it, and that's where her and Allison bond so much, right?
So if you guys don't know who Ziggy or C. Berman is, if you guys haven't watched like our first episode, essentially C. Berman is this person who was killed in the first movie, but somehow survived, who was revived by CPR.
They reference she was killed in the first movie. Yeah. Obviously, we are going backwards, so this is where we see where that happened. We know this going into this film. We just now are seeing how it happened.
Yeah. And so now we're seeing her story, which is what part 2 is, and how one of the killers, one of the more prominent killers of Sarah Fier's minions.
Yeah. I think the most recognizable, I don't want to say the most intriguing, because the internet has been going crazy over Ruby Lane and wanting to know her backstory, because we get the axe killer from Camp Nightwing, we get his backstory in this film.
Mm-hmm.
We know a little bit about Ruby Lane, but she's like she seems to be a very popular one online, which is cool to me.
Me too.
And you can expand on that stuff.
And it wouldn't surprise me if there was like another part where they make another
I think
part.
they're going to continue. I think they're going to continue, and we'll get into this more in part 3, but I think they're going to continue making the Fear Street movies, which I would love. It's going to obviously bank on the success of this trilogy.
Yeah. With that said, the only thing I don't want to happen is, with this being so well done, I don't want them to rush it. That's one thing, because whenever you have rush products, the quality of it tends to go downhill.
Yeah, because these films were supposed to be out in June 2020. Mm-hmm. I believe they were supposed to be out. I don't know if June's the exact month. I know it was going to be summer of 2020, and the licensing deal ran out, and then Netflix picked it up, and here we are today. 2020, it didn't get released because 2020. So, had a lot of that stuff happening, but like Ziggy, who is C. Berman, at the beginning of the film, when we're at the camp, like a bunch of people were blaming, like almost like she's a witch. Like they're doing that whole thing to her.
Yep.
Like all this weird stuff that's happening.
Bullying her.
Yeah, and so we do see her joking. We see some great moments. We also have Sheriff Good. We have him as his young self in this film, which he's great in this film.
Yeah.
He seems super likable. You're rooting for him in this film.
Yeah.
Which kind of changes later throughout the series. But essentially, like, there's a great exchange between him and Ziggy when she's mixing up, like, food coloring and something, and Sheriff Good walks in, and he's like, "Is that blood?" She's like, I couldn't find pig blood, but essentially, like, she was gonna put this blood all over somebody, and he's like, "All right, you can carry on," which that is a direct reference to, like, the pig blood moment of Carrie, Stephen King's novel, and dumping pig blood on Carrie at the dance. So it's like, that is such an awesome, like, wink to the crowd and nod to the horror genre that I was so proud to, like, have caught. And I did catch that one on rip. I was like, he did not just say what I think he did. And I had to look back at it, and I was like, yeah, they went for it.
Yeah, they do reference Carrie a few times in this trilogy. Yeah, you can't. So you root for Nick Good in this movie. You root for Christine in this movie, Ziggy, and you pretty much root for every Shadyville person. In this,
because they're trying to find, they're starting to figure out more lore when it comes to Sarah Fier, right?
Yeah.
So Tommy almost gets killed by Mary Lane.
Yes.
Who is Ruby Lane's mother, and we also see her in part 1 as she picks the kids up while the babysitting's going on. Kate drops the kids off there, but we find a book that leads them down to the altar that's underground, and that's when stuff really begins to pop off.
Yeah, and it's also funny how it works because of all this shit that's been happening. They're bullying Ziggy and making fun of her because of all this witchcraft. Oh, you're just a witch, right? You know, and I'm just like, that's what they were doing. Come to find out, now all of a sudden they're down here in this hole, and it's like, fuck.
They see names etched against a
rock,
stone
like
wall.
a stone rock, yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So they're uncovering this. They find like the altar, and they keep hearing noises. Like Cindy keeps hearing noises, and then as they're down there, this is when I really start to like her and Alice like really do start becoming friends and like bonding over this, which is cool because they're such polar opposites. And then Tommy's name gets etched in the wall.
Yep.
And then comes up with probably my second favorite kill of the entire trilogy is Tommy goes, obviously you get hints at Tommy like kind of looking like he's going to be possessed by the witch, and then he goes full-blown possessed as the Camp Nightwing Killer and kills the boyfriend of Alice with some axe shots to the head, and then they walk out and he's just bludgeoning this man's head with an axe. Crazy. Brutal. Why?
I was watching this at work, I was watching this at work, and I was texting. It was fun because I was like, "Hey, you watched the second one yet?"
I was getting typical Justin texts like, "What the fuck? Oh my god!"
Yeah. Well, because I was mid work too. He was like, "Are you watching this at work?" I was like, "Yeah, I am."
So you saw that all at work?
Yeah, and it was so fucked up because usually, and this is something I applaud the director for in this movie is a lot of times when somebody turns or whenever something, because you could see that something was happening to Tommy. Like you could see, like, because he would go into before they were even down there, he would go into these trances, and like he would hear shit, and like you'd see like you'd get into his mind and you see like the blurriness of things or whatever the case would be, right? And so he finally ends up getting completely possessed, and he gets this axe, and he's like, I want, like, they're like, I want to be on whatever you're on, because I'm not hearing nothing, like, because they're all doing drugs, smoking weed, and like whatever. So he gets possessed. One of the things that happens is whenever something like this happens, and you find out who the killer is, they don't typically kill someone like that. It's like you give them some time. Oh shit! It's this person.
Or some kills had happened, and they finally find out.
Yeah. Oh shit! It's this person. I'm gonna run. That's not how this worked. You find out that Tommy gets possessed. Immediately, I wasn't expecting it. I immediately texted Rome because the axe to the head was fucking brutal.
Yeah, it was crazy. It wasn't just like how we got Simon in part 1, just an axe to the head and he falls to the ground. Like, it was several shots to the head, and they do a great job of showing the gore. It was incredible.
He just kept going and going, and I'm like, yo.
Yeah.
This was almost as bad as the bread slicer.
Yeah, I mean, it's like more on like a blunt force brutal level. The bread slicer add creativity, add brutalness, add a character we really, really care about. I wouldn't say I really cared about Alice's boyfriend. So that as a Kate's kill obviously wins out because of all those reasons. But that moment is huge, and then you get a chase scene with Tommy going after Alice and Cindy, and the walls down in that cavern collapse. They go behind a bookcase, and basically they collapse and they're stuck down there. And then Tommy also ends up just wreaking havoc across the camp over several sequences. I would love to get into them, but we're trying to cover pretty much all this movie. So you get all of that, and you do eventually have Ziggy and him meeting up, and they get a great sequence in kind of like the back closet where it looks like all the snacks are or something like that. And that's where he gets the burlesque sack or whatever over his face. And we knew he was the killer, but it was cool to see the inception of the sack going over his face,
Yeah.
So
I agree. I mean, it's dope and how they paid homage to Friday the 13th is even. I mean, I think the fact that they were able to pay homage to a bunch of horrors in all 3 of these films were, I mean, great to me. I love it because you don't get that enough in a lot of horror movies. I think there's room for everybody to win.
Yeah,
but
it's fantastic. It's you're not stealing from it. You're not shot by shot doing it. The beginning of part 1 did enough to let you know that they were paying homage to Scream, but also just say, hey, we understand where the horror community in the 90s was built on. It was Scream. And so it's just, you're just paying respect to it, and it's incredible.
Yeah.
So we get a lot of more lore about Sarah Fier's hand. They find her hand, and they're like, oh, what we need to do is put the hand back with the body, and all this will stop.
They didn't know where the grave was. They thought the grave was where it originally was.
Yeah.
But the only people who knew where the grave was were Dina, Sam, and everybody.
And this is me asking because I don't remember. So tell us in the comments if you remember. Is that we find out where the body is? I don't remember between the 3 films where we find out that the body is, because we know Dina knows where the body is eventually because they just searched her grave.
I don't think they knew because whenever Cindy and Ziggy were running at the end of film 2, they were just running, right? They weren't running to the grave.
They go to the tree that's in we find out is the tree in the middle of the mall.
Yeah.
So that's that's a cool flashback that we have later related to that. But we find out, you got to join those two pieces together. And that's what they think is going to stop all this. Because we find out when Tommy, or the Camp Nightwing Killer, has been killed, like, that he's, like, he can't be killed. Under Sarah Fierce's control.
Yeah. I think the only people who knew where the actual grave was were the people from 94, which were like Dina, Sam, Josh.
Yeah. So we find out they want to join. They want to stop everything by joining those two together, and they think that's going to stop it.
Yeah. Which is probably one of their best ideas.
Compared to the first one.
Yeah. What ends up happening is, so Ziggy and Cindy are running away and are trying to bring this hand over to the grave.
Yeah.
And
like that, yeah, because that's when all the killers come by, and that's when we start seeing. We've already seen a few henchmen in part 1, but you start seeing like all the henchmen. Like you see the milkman, and you see, I believe you see the little boy with the bat. So you see them, and they're all like surrounding them and kill Cindy and Ziggy, which ends up getting brutal. Right, that ends up getting brutal, like stabbings, like to the point where Cindy and Ziggy should not. Like Cindy dies, Ziggy is C. Berman. She is, from what we think we know from part 1, is she was found with wounds and was resuscitated with CPR, which we have our problems with that. We're gonna get into it more in part 3, because speaking in part 2's context.
That's
and
crazy.
From knowing what we know from part 1, we're like, there's no way she would have survived all those wounds.
Yeah, if you're a nurse and you watch this and you know, is there a way to resuscitate somebody off of stab wounds?
Until you see part 3, obviously. Because like it would make no sense if we didn't know part 3.
We don't believe any, like, that's crazy.
So
like,
in present time, I know we're being ignorant because we've seen part 3.
Yeah.
But in present time, we're watching this like, all right, how the hell did this happen?
Yeah.
We need to know how she survived this.
So one of the things that I want to mention in this specific scene is Cindy, her sister, who said she apologized. This is what this to me was emotional because I didn't cry or anything like that, but it was.
That's a surprise. Justin cries it a lot.
No, the fuck I literally cried in like 2 movies, one of which is Toy Story 3. But if you guys know, I'm like a big Disney nerd. Also love horror, so I don't know how that came about, but I love both. Which, by the way, I got a tattoo that incorporated horror and Disney together.
He did.
Which is,
we're getting off a tangent, but I love that tattoo.
Yeah.
I love that tattoo.
So. And I'm probably never gonna do color again, just so everybody knows. Anyway.
I'm glad the viewers. So anyway.
Yeah. So the
it was emotional.
Emotional to me because Cindy at the beginning, like me personally, and you having 1, 2, 3 other siblings. Mm-hmm. I had to count that out for a second. So, and you having 3 other siblings, like I would do anything, literally anything for my brother. Mm-hmm. I mean, like I'm older, he's younger. If I had to sacrifice myself in order for him to live, I would do that.
Yeah.
And I'm 1,000% serious. That's like something I would do for my little brother.
And them being like helpless, looking at each other while they were both dying is very emotional. Like you said, it's emotional. It has a lot of weight to it.
So Cindy ended up sacrificing herself after not having a good relationship with her sister. Mm. Throughout this movie, you see that they've kind of fallen apart, and that they're, Cindy's trying to do this thing where she tries to feel like she's somebody from Sunnyvale, and Christine, Ziggy, has just taken on the whole.
She's very upfront, very in your face, like we were saying earlier.
She doesn't care about what anybody else thinks. She's just doing what she wants to do.
Yeah. Which I think it's great that Alice is the influence she is for Cindy, because they do, like, she helps bring Cindy out of her shell. And we were talking about emotional deaths, like Cindy's death, or Alice's death. Really, like, I felt that one because she was my favorite character arc throughout the film.
Yeah.
So we had how she died at the hands of the Camp Nightwing Killer after he came back to life. That death also, I felt I felt that death because I was like, her and Cindy are polar opposites, and they were awesome working as a team throughout this film.
Yes, trying to get out of that underground, like, tunnel.
When you feel like
together.
you're locked in and there's nowhere to go.
Yeah, and polar opposites trying to work together. Come to find out that they used to actually be best friends with each other, and Cindy just wanted to change who she was as a person.
And both of them, like Alice losing her boyfriend through death, Cindy losing her boyfriend through the possession. Like they lean on each other, and it's a really good, it's a great character arc for both of them.
Yeah.
And I think it does a very good job, and they acted extremely well. So it is sad when we finally see Alice die, which this film, part 1 and part 2 do a great job of like, hey, they don't hold anything back. Like if they're gonna kill off a main character, we're gonna feel it.
Yeah. Well, with that said, bro, I know you weren't like that big of a fan of the writing in the first one. How do you feel about the writing in this?
So I really liked the writing in part 2 because it felt like what they were saying made more sense in the environment they were in. In 1978, it felt like some of that writing being a little more throwback, a little. You always say something can be corny. Like it felt more like in place from 1978 than it did when they were trying to write 3 characters that were gonna carry the trilogy, right? So it's harder to establish a character and make them likable and write them into the story like they did with Dina, which I had my issues with that, versus having a prequel, which is essentially what 78 is, to 94, and writing those characters in a quote-unquote flashback. So I'm a big fan of, I know Friday the 13th doesn't have the best dialogue, so I actually loved like that they embraced that slasher feel. Like they embraced it, and that's why it's situational. If I'm going to get a certain type of movie and the dialogue fits and the writing fits, then I'm going to love it. It's going to make more sense than something that feels forced, as I felt in part 1.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I 1000% agree.
And that's why I rate part 1 what I did, and what I will rate part 2 is what I did.
What do you rate part 2, bro?
So I can't put it as a 4.5.
Okay.
That would be way too high, I think, for a movie that didn't really scare me. So I want to give it a 4 because, spoiler alert, we'll actually rank them at the beginning of our next episode. But part 2 is my favorite of all of them. So I would give it a 4 just from overall, I'm a Friday the 13th stan, so I love the slasher genre. I thought 78 was the perfect time to do this, and I loved the characters. There wasn't much I hated about it or disliked. So that's my rating, Justin. What do you got for us?
Makes a lot of sense, especially with you being a Friday the 13th fan. Personally, I would 1,000,000% agree with you. I really wasn't scared in this movie, but there were moments in here that made me go, "Oh fuck." Or, oh shit.
A lot of intensity. A lot of feeling intense, feeling locked up in the chest and stuff like that.
So, with that said, this is not my favorite in this trilogy. I cannot rate it because I wasn't that scared. I cannot rate it a 4.
Okay.
But I will not go lower than a 3. We don't do 0.25s, we don't do 0.1s, but we do halves, and I'm going to give it a 3.5.
Okay. 3.5 out of 5.
Because I do believe it's better than the first one.
Yeah.
And
you gave the first one a 3?
I did.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's what I'm going to give it. I give it a 3.5. We don't really veer off very much as far as when we give these ratings separately.
A lot of them are in line. We haven't dove too much into one that would be so different from our views. It's like, I'm a big found footage guy, he's not, so we haven't really covered a found footage film, which we will eventually when the Paranormal Activity reboot comes out. We'll be covering that. I don't care what he says. So we'll be watching that, and then we'll probably have a different view on the rating. Probably. But we do a great job, I think, of like talking through it and aligning on the movies we're going to like and what we don't like. Everyone has their own opinion, so it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. So with that said, man, let us know what you think. If there's something that you guys need to tell us that we missed or whatever,
give us that feedback.
Let us know, whatever the case may be. We appreciate you guys watching, and we love to see comments in our YouTube section. We love it. We love to see it. We love it.
We'll reply to every single one.
Yeah, literally every single one, even if it takes us hours, because we have replied to every single one. So just keep them coming. We love the interaction. We love it. Thank you for tuning in. Watch out for part 3 of this Fear Street trilogy.
Part 2's fire. Watch it.
Deuces.